Thank you. So Aislinn, I'm interested in what you wanted to use this time for and how you wanted to kind of spend your time. Um,
Yeah,
and you can open up there and take us away if you'd like. And if you're okay to hold your own for a few moments, I do have to do a little bit more back end things. Um, so yeah, as Catherine said, it is a filibuster. You're more than welcome to take this space for whatever you want.
thank you. Thank you so much, Q. And I did want to say on the back end things, Kate did mention that you may need a host for the next couple hours, and I'm happy to do that. I don't know what the communication has been, but I told Kate that I'm happy to do that if that's what's needed. I'm if that yeah. So and I can talk too.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, just let
You're
me know.
fantastic. Yeah, you're jumping in so great for us. I really appreciate it. Um, yeah, for now, if you wanna take away on-screen hosting and fill this time however you see fit, and I'll organize some back-end things, and we'll be in touch in in a moment again.
That sounds good. Yeah, I'm definitely happy to hop hop in, and I'll just introduce myself. Um, my name is Aislinn Thomas, and my in terms of a self description, a visual description, I'm a white cis woman. I'm in my late 30s, and I use she or they pronouns. I'm on the lower end of the weight spectrum, and I have kind of poofy auburn hair, short hair. And today I'm wearing a green sweater, but mostly I think you see the top of a puffy vest and a yellow scarf with polka dots. And yeah, and behind me is just a light gray wall. I I don't rely on the visuals quite so much. So if folks are need to give me cues, it might be better to use audio, although I'll try to monitor the chat. So I just wanted to name that. And I'm really grateful to be joining you from Peace and Friendship Treaty Territory. I only moved here in August to Unama'ki, which is colonially known as Cape Breton Island. It's just one small part of Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq. And yeah, I'm really grateful to be here, and it felt just have a real debt of gratitude for the hospitality of the Mi'kmaq Nation. And as my friend Anna Bowen has said, I endeavor to be a student of that my oh shoot, I'm gonna mess it up. She talks about being a student that her privilege requires her to be, and next time I'm going to look up how she phrases it, and so I can correctly quote and attribute the way that thought. I I didn't bring anything really formal. Later today, my friend Carmen and I kind of signed up for talking more about access intimacy and what it's meant for us to find disabled community and kind of identify as disabled from a political identity, like through the lens of, yeah, political identities, which has been really meaningful for me. But I think I said this yesterday, but I'm just so grateful for this space. I've been trying to tune in as much as possible. I didn't sleep very well the other night because I was trying to take it in, and that was a big mistake. I need a very specific like sleep wake routine to stave off migraines, and even then it doesn't always work. But anyhow, I'm really hopeful that the recording can be made available in the future so we can catch up on all this juicy stuff. And where was I going to go from there? Like, oh, I'll just sort of riff on some of the things that I've heard. And one of the things I was thinking about that's really been for me a meaningful aspect of this container, this space, is that I think that the first night, or to be honest, I've lost track of days, but when Sarah Jama and Andre and I don't know Andre's last name, but when they were speaking together, I felt they did such a great job of, um, I'll backtrack. Like so often I feel like, especially in light of conversations like are happening around Bill C7, there's this impulse to have to talk about how disability is such a great thing, how, it's not no problem being disabled. Like I'm really happy in as a disabled person, and yes, we have to work on these things, but the issues are out there in the world and not in our physical body minds. But I feel that in sharing space with other disabled folks and people with disabilities, and Sarah and Andre modeled this so well, like being able to talk about our experience of our lives as this leaky ship versus the, well-tuned vessel that we feel we have to present to the rest of the world. That and Sarah is talking about how common suicidality is for people with disabilities. It just really normalized that. And I don't know, it's just such a natural response when you're receiving all these loud and subtle messages from the world about being a burden or your life being less valuable because you can't perform under capitalism. And yeah, I just have been so appreciative of that. And I don't know, I have some notes here that I don't even fully understand, but I was thinking like, I think I just made a Twitter account this week because I was finally like, oh, I just have to jump in here because I find social media so overwhelming, but I guess Twitter is where all the politicians are and so on, all the media as well. And I just wanted to, like Catherine said, like, oh shoot, I forget the sports metaphor, like leaving it all on the field. It's just like, I guess I have to join Twitter, and I've discovered that, and I haven't fully, partaken, but the disability Twitter is so rich and alive as well. So I hope I can find a way to stay and not get totally overwhelmed by screen time and stuff. But oh yeah, I'm good at talking in these eddies of thought. But I would like to make a t-shirt that says grievous and irremediable because I think that whoever wrote Bill C7, the law itself, like, and I've read it a couple times, and I think they feel like when they're using that language, they're pointing to like kind of the worst of the worst cases of disability and disabling conditions. But as Gabrielle Peters has pointed out, and just that actually describes most of us. I know for myself, like, I think the very definition of chronic illness is that it's ongoing. There's no cure. And so it's definitely irremediable. And I look up these terms. I've looked up in the dictionary, grievous and irremediable. I look them up like every day because I'm just like, wait, what? I need to remind myself, like, grievous just means bad. It's bad. And I don't know, I have chemical sensitivity and it's bad. Like the pandemic has not changed the nuts and bolts of my life much at all. I made a big move during the pandemic and that was a lot, but that had nothing really, that's neither here nor there. But I was very tethered to home because most public space and most private spaces too are just not accessible to me. And so I don't know, I think that there's it's really, I have a lot of anticipatory grief about the vote today, and it's meant a lot to be able to tune into the filibuster. And Catherine, I don't know if you're listening, but the other day I was, I don't know what wormhole I had gotten in with reading about C7, but I saw something that you had written in the 90s about in response to all the conversation happening in the wake of Tracy Latimer's murder. And I was just so in awe of the stamina because the last few months have been really hard and emotionally. Like listening, I tuned into the majority of the Senate hearings and debates, and it took a lot out of me. I don't know, it's just so blatant, the ableism. And so to know there are people who for decades have been in this conversation and speaking truth to power, I just am in awe of your stamina. Yeah.
I don't know if it's stamina. You know, it isn't. There's a combination, of course, of stubbornness, which is part of how we survive. But the other part of it is it's love. I mean, we love our people.
Mm.
And so, you know, what wouldn't you do for love? You'd do everything you could. And I'm privileged to have someone who will help me every step of the way. So, yeah. And people all around in this community.
Yeah.
So thank you.
It's so beautiful, Catherine. Thank you. Thank you. I was first introduced, and I don't want to, please, what am I trying to say? Just don't feel you have to chat if it, you know, I know it takes a lot of energy and you've been doing this for days and hours on end, but so I can just talk as well. Although I love talking with you, but I was just remembering that I didn't really know anything about MAID really until I guess it was 2018, where the Human Flourishing Project with Tangled Art and Disability, and yeah, and that was such a privilege to meet you then, and it's so interesting because I think it wasn't until this fall where it really kind of came on my radar again in a big way, and it's just been so quiet in the media, and yeah.
Yeah, it has, and I suppose you know, that's one of that maybe is the core power of ableism, is that it completely blocks the ability to understand, and what isn't understood, it can't be engaged with. And you know, so yeah, I'm interested in your perspective as an artist, because the work that artists do transcends language, and often that's one of the ways to break through the blocks of you know, of minds that are closed, because ableism is such a pernicious infection that, you know, and I see it, and I won't take up too much of your time here, but I see it in the individual meetings that I have had with senators and with members of parliament, many of whom are, you know, they're good people. They believe they're doing the right thing, and yet they hear us, you know, sort of shrieking from the margins. And it's almost like an animal that tilts its head when it wants to know exactly what you mean. It's sort of trying to listen, but you know, dogs do that gesture really well. And I could see that same gesture. I don't mean it to be an insult. I mean, I love dogs. It's a human gesture as well. They just don't understand. And we struggle to find the language that pierces that block. But it's not easy. And I think language has its limitations. So back to my question of you, I mean, have you well, broadly, your thoughts about the place of art in liberating consciousness and breaking through walls, but also I can't even remember the other more particular question, but I'm sure you can riff on this for a bit.
Oh yeah, for sure. Thank you. I do want to first say, like, on the media, the question of the media, I think, there have been so many powerful, eloquent op-eds and so few news stories. And I'm curious, like, I would so much love to have a sneak peek into the behind the scenes, like to be on a fly on the wall on conversations, because it feels almost like there are some, I don't know if this is the right terminology, but editorial decisions being made. We see it with conversations around vaccine hesitancy. We don't tend to hear from people who are concerned about vaccines because the media doesn't want to spread that concern. But I feel there's a similar thing around MAID. And I heard this interview on As It Happens with the UN Special Rapporteur on persons with disabilities,
Yes.
whose name's escaping me. But
Gerald Quin.
Gerald Quin, yes. And Carol Off grilled him. She grilled him. And I remember, I mean, I could listen to him speak all day. He's like so soft-spoken and is speaking such truth. And it's kind of this amazing combination, which I think you have too, Catherine. And he had, one of the things I really appreciate about the UN is their use of the term ableism, because I don't think it's a term that everyone is comfortable with, and that's not in our popular culture or shared language with the non-disabled like mainstream. But Gerald Quin talked about the ableist assumptions, I think may have been the term he used. And Carol Off said, "What ableist assumptions?" Like the way she said it was like, what do you mean ableist assumptions? I was thinking, oh my goodness, like this just speaks volumes, And I actually like kind of took a bit of a break from the show. I love the combination of kind of levity and serious conversations. But I took a break because I was so frustrated. I've called into their talkback line like 3 times, and usually every time I call, I only get to say like a small fraction before I get cut off. And so I called back and I finished my thought, and I'm just like, oh my God, I'm that person, from Nabu, Nova Scotia, who won't leave them alone. But yeah, they've never replied, and they've never taken any kind of different approach in their interviewing. When you hear about people affected by MAID on that program and the other programs I've tuned into, it's usually people who would be advocating for for Bill C7, not from the point of view of the second track so much, but from the point of view of, I think they call it Audrey's amendment, and allowing people who are dying to have better access to MAID, people who are whose end of life is, they use the term reasonably foreseeable, but nothing from nothing from what I think are like maybe the majority of the stakeholders, if it's okay, I don't know how I feel about that word, it sounds so corporate, but the people who would be most impacted by this, given that disabled folks are such a large percentage of the population, and we're being offered early death, state administered early death. I don't know, I don't understand really.
Yeah, and and as we consider how difficult it is for us as well-spoken white women, it's just mind-blowing. I cannot and I think part of what the filibuster has really greatly expanded what I understood intellectually, but I hadn't felt in my gut the same way, is how much more complex, more layered, and more difficult it is for other populations, for indigenous people, for people who are living in extreme poverty on the streets. Garth, I'm sorry, I can't remember his last name. He was on late last night. I'm sure you weren't watching, being much more smart about these things than me, but he was so powerful talking about his experience as a heroin user, and he spoke of the perceptions or the logic of the opposition, and said, the healthcare system that they're talking about is a fixture of their imagination. Like it's an imaginary television show, or it's not real. And of course it isn't, to from his experience. And so we can, we have the skill to, and it's not just skill. No, it's not skill at all. We have the pass card that gets us into, or that gets me into, a meeting with a senator. But even with that, we're not getting through. But when you spoke earlier of persistence, I think that's part of the obligation that I feel, to just keep doing it, keep bringing. Well, anyway, just bringing whatever I have to the fight. But that Karloff interview, that was quite extraordinary, and it reminded me. Patricia held up a note to remind me that at the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission, you're probably aware of the big human rights case about housing and about people who had been institutionalized, and for years and years and years, solely because supportive housing isn't available in Nova Scotia. And a group, the Disability Rights Coalition, brought a complaint to the Human Rights Commission, and the complaint went through its tribunal process. And I testified at that hearing, the Board of Inquiry, about ableism, about systemic ableism, and how this was not a problem of three people that could be dealt with by, one of whom is now dead, but a problem that could be fixed by addressing the needs of those remaining living people with disabilities, because it's a systemic problem, and it's because of systemic ableism. And the decision came out from the Board of Inquiry, a human rights expert Board of Inquiry, that basically said ableism doesn't exist, and that this was strictly a problem of a few individuals. So here we have a long way to go, when even champions of human rights cannot embrace the concept of ableism.
Wow.
It's a bit of a downer, isn't it?
What's that? A downer,
it's a bit of a downer.
It is. It's really interesting, because when the UN, there were several statements released by the UN. There was something from a little while back after the UN Special Rapporteur came and toured Canada, and maybe it was 2016, and they flagged MAID as an issue, as a threat to the human rights of people with disabilities. And then again, a more kind of a general statement that wasn't specifically to Canada, because I I understand that other countries are entertaining or pushing through similar legislation where they said that disability should never be a basis for assisted death. And then a 7-page letter to the, like, written specifically to the Canadian government, outlining the multiple infractions to international human rights conventions that Canada is signatory to, that is presented by Bill C7. But where I was going with this is I was so grateful when I saw that, and and as I said, like the way they were using ableism and really speaking truth. And at the same time, I felt a sadness because there's this sense in which it's another aspect of ableism that we're just never allowed to be experts on our own experiences, and we need to defer to external expertise, whatever that is. And so anyhow, but then you gave this example of, yeah, when the experts fail us. I don't know, it's yeah. I've been practicing a lot of silent screams into the void.
Well, they're therapeutic for sure. I think we're all doing a bit of that. But on the other hand, thinking of human flourishing, speaking of human flourishing, I mean, what feels to me so rich about the filibuster is that, we have found yet another, not we have found, we have together invented another form of human flourishing. And we are performing our flourishing for the nation so that perhaps they will, just understand what is at stake here and why we feel so passionately about this and why what they're doing is so terribly wrong and why this isn't just another matter of fractured politics. It's not fair to be deciding this issue on the basis of where the political fortunes of the future lie.
Yeah.
And, if we can make one appeal to our politicians today as they vote, because I hear that there is still, it's a very tight vote. I hear that more and more people are pulling back and, probably not going to vote against the bill, but might abstain. So, maybe a few more are listening now, I don't know. But we have to go on faith that that might be happening. But where I was headed was that, what you spoke about yesterday, access, intimacy, it just struck me how ironic that in the most unintimate medium in the world, a Zoom window on a computer or a cell phone, that we have fashioned a certain level of human intimacy. That is, that's one of the gifts that our people bring. Incredible imaginative capacity. And yeah, you might want to talk about the contribution. I know you don't like to talk about yourself, but you're an artist, and and you have done some beautiful and incredibly creative and sometimes very humorous things in your portfolio. Maybe I should ask you just to help us lift the mood. We can step away from Bill C7 if you like for a moment and talk about your favorite art project, or we don't have to, But we should probably talk a bit about flourishing.
Sure. I will say that, and I remember some conversations with you, Catherine, about like it helped me to really kind of, I don't know, it's an ongoing practice to divest from black and white thinking, and that, you know, flourishing doesn't mean the absence of struggle and suffering. It's interesting. It's a little hard for me to talk about in a way because I do feel that sometimes like my survival needs are still, I can still be in survival a lot of the time, like
Yes.
especially with this transition, because part of, and I'm sorry, I'm not gonna be lifting the mood right away, but
It's okay.
oh, thank you. It's really hard to, it's been hard. Housing is really hard. I know a lot of people with disabilities experience it in all different ways, and I mean, all different aspects are hard with housing for different reasons, but it's been hard to find safe housing that's, yeah, right now we're actually renting a whole house, which I've never done, and it's this huge privilege and luxury. And at the same time, there's I'm only able to be in a small part of it, and I'm actually really grateful for it because we could only find one rental place. It's just so rural where we are, and anyhow, there was a while in the fall where I was really nervous to try turning on the heat because there's a mold issue, and it's forced air heating, and it yeah, so I put it off, and we had such a warm fall here that I could get away without using heat for a long time. But when we tested it, sure enough, it was a problem for me. And so for a long time, I was wearing snow pants and like, I don't know, it was grim, and trying lots of things, and the things we were trying weren't working. And I was really kind of, my energy was pulled for a couple weeks into like emergency planning, basically. Like, and I think I'm sure a lot of people can relate. And anyhow, so I don't know how I got there thinking about art, but I think it's just that I in the art world often, I mean, less so in disability arts, but I feel like I can't be real about those realities all the time, or there's just not really an awareness of those realities, although I know a lot of artists face all sorts of precarity, economic precarity. So yeah, but I think some of the issues I experience are just kind of a little fringe. Like right now, I'll just share these. I don't know, I think it's funny, but I took a shower this morning and I couldn't find a towel, and I realized it's because I had pinned all the, like the towels that we have are all pinned on the windows because I wasn't, because the curtains weren't enough blocking the light. So I ended up, that's happened before too, where I'm like drying myself off with the curtain. But anyhow, and there's tinfoil over everything, which is something I learned from Linda Sepp, who has been so generous. Oh, sorry, were you speaking, Catherine?
No, I was just laughing. I'm sorry.
So like I look around and like I started reacting to, I'm really lucky, I'm still okay with quite a bit, well, most of food packaging really, but Linda told me about foil tape, because foil is a really good vapor barrier. So like I put foil tape over the labels that have really strong inks, like, because I guess ink is often like a petroleum based, and so, is that the right word, like a petrochemical product? Yeah, and so that can send me off. And I also put foil tape all over my, like I have all these access conflicts, like where I need a heating pad, but the heating pad is vinyl and it's making me sick, and and so I put foil tape all over that. And anyhow, there's also tape on all sorts of things that we're trying to contain the stuff here, but or sorry, tinfoil, like we used painter's tape on like things that belong to the house. But anyhow, it's like my life is very DIY, and I think, and I have and I'm so aware of my privilege too, because I'm not on provincial disability support, and so I as you were saying, Catherine, like I'm just so aware of all the extra layers of discrimination and marginalization and challenge that people face in poverty and through racial discrimination and through transphobia. And anyhow, it's so like survival can take up a lot of time.
Yes.
Yeah. But I'm really grateful to be able to make art, and it's sort of funny, like I talk about it, that it's sort of how do I usually, well, it's like a strange gift in a way of for context, like I have a brain injury, and so although I had chronic illness stuff before that, I wasn't connected to disabled community and I could really pass a lot and didn't identify as disabled really. But since my brain injury and then kind of escalating chemical sensitivity, there's no passing. But after my brain injury, just the barriers to work increased so significantly, and even volunteer opportunities. I joke because there's an organization my partner is now kind of peripherally involved with. They're giving some training and stuff, and they rejected my application for volunteer on the basis of disability. And this was
goodness.
yeah, I know, it's awful. And they're this kind of amazing, well, like very much treasured organization in the community. But it wasn't until a couple years after, where I was facing like dentists and doctors declining to accommodate me, that I started to understand like how to actually invoke the law, which I really hesitated to do for a long time. And that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, figuring out income streams became really hard, and I was really lucky that my partner was like very supportive and willing for us to just live super simply. I mean, but so I just have the time where I'm not in survival or, lying in bed. I can do art. I can make art, and when I can, it's very, it's kind of precarious, like, but when I can get a grant, then that's great, and because grants pay subsistence costs, and that helps a lot. But yeah, it is a huge privilege to be able to dedicate the time that I am able to that. And it's actually been a really great way to get a little more connected with community. And Carmen, who will be joining me later, I know from I was introduced to him through our art practices, and that's been an amazing friendship. And I was introduced to you, Catherine, and Sean Lee, and the people at Tangled. And since I am very much tethered to home, like most of my relationships are phone based, and often kind of forged, or sometimes, like, because I haven't figured out social media quite as well as some other people who've been on here, and it's been really helpful. Making art has provided social access as well as, meaningful kind of engagement with ideas and conversations, but also a way to meet people and stuff. And I feel like Sean Lee could speak so much better to the potential for art to communicate and break down barriers. And I mean, I often use language in my art myself, and I'm actually like, I don't know, I get a lot of life of hearing other people talk about it, because I feel like I'm maybe not as optimistic as some, but Cyrus Ware spoke so eloquently on the panel, Death by Coercion, that the Disability Justice Network of Ontario, co-organized with some other groups. And he has such an inspiring vision of a world led by multiply marginalized disabled folks. And I think it was Cyrus, yeah, I'm quite sure it was Cyrus who talked about making the revolution irresistible.
Yes.
I just love that so much. Yeah. But yeah.
It's very, very true. Yeah. I remember a filmmaker, I can't remember, it will probably come to me. I believe she was a Francophone Canadian, or is a Francophone Canadian. One of the very first movies I saw, there was no disability angle to it, but it was one of the first Canadian movies about a lesbian relationship that I had seen. It was many, probably 2 decades ago. And I was intrigued by the movie and the director, and remember reading, because we were reading an interview that they had done with her. And what was most perhaps arresting about the film was that it was visually just very, very beautiful. The cinematography was extraordinary. And she spoke to that in the interview. And it's always stayed with me. It's good advice for art that comes from disability too. She said, if you really want people to pay attention to a film that it centers a subject that they actually don't like, you have to make it very, very beautiful. And yeah, I think it's the same idea. Like we have to produce. It's just another example of the extra labor that we have to put in to simply being citizens and being heard, but that we have to make our revolutionary views somehow irresistible. And so we rise to that challenge as best we can.
Yeah. Oh, you said it so well.
I remember many years ago, I worked, it was a privilege to work on a film that Bonnie Klein directed for the NFB. And it was called Shameless, and it was about, it featured 4 artists with disabilities. And at one point, no, I don't think it was actually in the film. Might have been, I can't remember, but people who have seen that film back in the day, I remember strikingly, some people said, gee, it actually made me kind of jealous that I wasn't disabled. I thought, well, that's what we were aiming for.
I think I was saying this to Carmen the other day, and I actually loved it. I think we didn't really get into it, so I'd love to hear what he thinks too, but I feel like being disabled kind of saved me. And I mean, I have an acquired disability, and I know everyone's experience of disability is quite different, but that's just one factor in mine. And but feeling like up until that point, like very much not, I've heard the term the tyranny of normal. Like everyone's held up to the tyranny of normal, non-disabled and disabled alike. And one of the things about connecting to disabled community and to the extent that I am and just identifying as disabled is just like being able to throw all measures of normal out the window. And not that it's easy all the time, but hearing, I think it was Candace from Cans yesterday.
Cans, yes.
Yeah, describing the dance parties, like, oh, it just sounded so amazing.
Oh, they are. I've been to them, and I can't remember if she described. I think I was on a call, but listening to her with one ear. but we used to put at the Society for Disability Studies, I'm sure they still do it. Well, no, they probably don't, because I suspect it's very unsettling for certain groups of us. But, you know, we, at the time, it would be mostly wheelchair users and people who were able to move in an upright way and weren't so sensitive to stimulation. And we used to put bubble wrap on the floor. We would just, I mean, it was just such a pleasure to drive around and cause this kind of uproar from the floor as we popped the bubbles everywhere. But yeah, no, as I think of it, I hope they're not still doing it, because I'm sure it would be very troubling for many of us.
You're right. Well, maybe you could have a couple different dance floors. You could have a quiet
Yes.
one and the one that's
Yes.
covered in bubble wrap.
Yes, exactly. Why not? I mean, we have, you know, I keep thinking as you're speaking too of the concept of crip time and how we really have tried in the filibuster, you know, not entirely successfully, but we've made an earnest effort, and I think with some good effect, of kind of pushing away the thinking that prioritizes the schedule over what people's bodies and states of well-being actually require. And when we prioritize that, for many of us, it means slowing everything down. And that must be a concept that's a little bit irresistible to people who are, you know, those normal people, or people who are aspiring to achieve the ideal of normalcy. My goodness, they have to work hard to keep up that great fiction and to qualify for the status that it confers. And yeah, if we could just let go of some of that, we
It's
would.
interesting. Oh, sorry, Catherine.
No, just, you know, we would be one small step forward toward a more inclusive human space.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just to complicate it a little bit, I know it's something Sean Lee has talked about, and maybe this was through Cripping the Arts in Toronto a few years back, where they talked about sometimes crip time can mean, yeah, like kind of abandoning the schedule and prioritizing the needs and schedule of our bodies or body minds. And sometimes it can mean keeping to the schedule because we know that wheel trans is going to come at a certain time, you know? And like, I love that because just, I love it when I think it kind of relates to this sense of what we have to put on for the face we have to put on for the larger world versus like how things tend to operate in disability culture, if I may, like that. It's a little complicated, like that we run into access conflicts all the time. Like I run into personal access conflicts all the time. I bought this air purifier. I'm ashamed to say that I need an air purifier, and but it is so loud that I can't really tolerate it. And like, oh no, I talked about the heating pad. Like, so those things happen like in just dealing with one person, but when a bunch of folks get together, of course, there can be some complex negotiations that have to happen. And yeah.
Yes, and a lot of mutual forgiveness and commitment to get better and better at it. But yeah, I totally understand.
Yeah.
I was thinking also earlier, I'm so my brain is a bit tired, so I have a thought when you're speaking and then it's gone. But then it comes back to me, so I'll just pop it up, even though it's not what we're talking about right now. But when you were speaking just a moment ago about how we all have different experience of always being members of or always being disabled in the medical sense, or becoming disabled again in the medical sense. We also have very different experience of embracing the identity, the social, the broad community of disability. But I'm remembering that yesterday, Jane Field, I don't know if Jane is watching us on the stream, but if you are, shout out to Jane, who sang for us yesterday and talked about her really remarkable experience of having moved from being non-disabled to suddenly very disabled, to then discover and living for years as a quadriplegic, and then discovering that she had been misdiagnosed. And through a long process of rehab, she became non-disabled again. And then later became disabled again because of an exacerbation. So Jane is someone who has been in and out and in and out. And I remember during her first experience of moving from disability to non-disability. So I had known Jane all of the time of our relationship as a paraplegic woman in a wheelchair, and then a woman in a power wheelchair with comparable function to my own. And then she went off for therapy for a while, and when I next saw her, she was bounding up the steps of my apartment building. And I remember during that period of being non-disabled, there was at least an element of grief for her, because she felt that she had lost her community. I mean, of course, on individual basis, she was still very much my friend, and I knew her as a comrade in disability activism. But it wasn't the same for her as a non-disabled ally. And I thought, and she had, I wish she were here with us, because she would have, of course, a much more precise and accurate account of that experience. But I just remember being very striking for me to hear her say that. And clearly from a place of very credible authority. There are things you lose when you become undisabled.
Yes, absolutely. It reminds me, and I'm not remembering the person's name, but there's a scholar who uses the term blindness gain. And does someone also talk about disability gain, maybe? About
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't heard the term, but I like it.
Oh, okay, yeah, I'll have to look that up. But just talking about how instead of sight loss, that you gain blindness. I think I've read about it in Georgina Klieg's book, More Than Meets the Eye, What Blindness Brings to Art. However, I think there's someone else who may have coined that term. So yeah, I'm not clear, but I can only imagine. Yeah, wow, what an amazing experience. I'm really looking forward to going back and listening to what I've missed in the filibuster. I really hope the recordings will be available.
Yes, that's certainly the plan. And yeah, there have been some, they have every single presentation, every single block of time, frankly, has been a gem. And yeah, so rewarding. And so like you, there's so many I want to watch again. And you know, when we were talking earlier about the sort of the background work that we have to do to survive and to oh, someone just
Yeah.
thought it was RGT, Rosemary Garland Thompson, who might have coined disability gain. Is that right? Do you think, Aislinn?
That sounds, thank you, Q. Thank you, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Of course, I should have been able to guess that. But anyway, I was just going to make a small observation. One of the things I really kind of like about the filibuster, although it's kind of goofy, but we've recorded all of the hemming and hawing and troubleshooting and blundering and foolishness that goes on before we can like bring people into the room. But you know, and it's kind of fun. I mean, I think it's what's wrong with making all that background stuff non-secret? What's wrong with exposing where it is difficult and awkward and clumsy, perhaps, about our quote performance? I mean, something there, isn't there?
Yes, I think so, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it puts me more at ease anyway to know that it's all part of the show. Here comes Q.
Hi. In the spirit of making the back end visible, we have come to the end of the hour that Aislinn signed up for, but we are also, as per usual, this transition period of the next 5 to 10 minutes is a little bumpy. So if you folks want to keep chatting the way you're already doing, I just wanted to make sure that that is a-okay with both of you, and that I might also cut you off at some point if our other folks do make it into the meeting. But yeah, I just wanted to have all of that here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you know, we're willing to, but also to the topic of background, if you would like to be in the spotlight while you do all of that work, we wouldn't want to deny you that. But I assume since you're asking, it would be your preference that we take.
Yeah. I'm not doing too much of the troubleshooting this time. Amazingly, I'm so happy to have someone else take it on at the moment. But we are doing a bit of troubleshooting to get Stephen into the room. But yeah, so I'm happy to have both of you continue. Also, Catherine, again, in the spirit of making the back end visible,
Yes.
as we have continued doing, I think it's just the crip way.
Yeah.
Are you okay to host Stephen in the CRPD discussion, or do you want or need a break and someone else to do that?
I would like to get dressed and get out of bed sometime before
Yes.
bedtime. But you know, my food pump is running. I'm getting breakfast. I'm certainly willing to start, but I think it's a 2-hour block, right?
Yeah, I think you're correct. And
Sorry.
I'm on Pacific time, so I'm trying to do time zones. Aislinn?
Yes, I have. So again, making the back end visible. Kate had told me that Fen is taking over at 2 Atlantic. Wait, wait. Okay, wait. No, sorry, that must be 3. Because I think that anyhow, I'm here. Yeah. I think Fen's coming in at 3, and
Correct.
I had said that I can stay on until Fen comes if that's helpful. But
that is,
I don't know if you're looking for a host in terms of like talking or like tech kind of stuff.
Gotcha. Yeah, Fenrir is coming on, you're correct, at 3 your time, because you're 4 hours ahead, correct?
Yes.
Ahead of Pacific. Yeah, that will be Fenrir. If you are okay to continue with on-screen host until we get back-end things sorted, and then when Steven and other folks talking about CRPD are in the call, then transitioning to back-end and I can help you with that transition. That would be the most helpful. And I can walk you through what back-end looks like if you need that.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. I haven't done that before. I'm like, but you know, like the notifications come up and tell you what to do, right? So I think anyhow, I don't know.
Yeah,
but,
it's pretty straightforward, and I can give nice, easy instructions.
My name is Mary from Pace.
Oh,
Yeah, you back?
Yes, absolutely. You sure can.
You guys want to put your mute buttons on?
yeah, it's all sorted.
Okay.
Just our.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
Nice.
Mark
All
said
right.
that he can also provide back-end support. I think. Actually, yeah, that'll be great, Mark. Thank you. And Steven just joined our call.
There we go. So our little back-end intermission did the trick to close the gap. That's great. All right, well, Aislinn, if you're willing to host, maybe I'll just stick around until Steve is settled and welcomed, and
Sure.
say hi to him, and then maybe I'll turn off my camera and put on some clothes.
Sounds good. Yeah.